So we will be looking at an Indonesian short story called Dia, which is translated to her. Now, this is a short story by Titis Basino, and we will be looking at the issue of polygamy in this short story. Now, before I move forward, let me just read a quote from the short story. A husband has the right to practice polygamy, and this was a test of my tolerance for it. I devoutly believed that as a woman, I was destined to accept and to protect. Had I not believed that and also considered the fate of my children, I would merely have asked for a divorce and left him. Now, let us look at what polygamy and the practice of polygamy is like in Indonesia. Now, the practice of polygamy for a very large period of time has been considered legal in Indonesia and is still being considered legal in Indonesia. Now, Indonesia is largely a Muslim dominated country with about 87% of the population being Muslims. And polygamy is not only practiced by the Muslim communities but also by the non-Muslim communities sometimes. Now, obviously, there has been a lot of controversy revolving polygamy in Indonesia, but Indonesian laws combined with religious laws continue to allow this practice still. Now, according to the religious laws, a man may have four wives. That is, if he does treat them equally. Now, besides that, he also requires the consent of his first wife. And besides that, illnesses, fatal illnesses, or infertility could also be reasons for a man to be allowed to take up more than one wife. However, till today, a lot of second marriages in Indonesia happens by bypassing these state laws and by not really legalizing the marriages that take place in Indonesia as such. So, if you look further into the short story, we see a woman who has the first woman, the first wife of um, of the man who has sacrificed everything for both him and her children. So she's been the wife who has managed the household, who took care of his children, who cooked for him, cleaned his clothes, and which is why she expects that he would stay faithful to her in marriage. Okay, so if you look at this particular quote, so you married her. Yes, why not? Couldn't you have stopped short of marriage? You already have one wife. I can deal with all your needs, can't I? So she herself here has, brought about this notion that as the wife that deals with his needs, he need not be worrying about getting a second wife. So she has brought down her primary duties and roles as a wife to managing his needs. And if you look at it, the concern that the primary wife does not that the primary wife has is not that the husband is shouldn't marry a second wife because he already has a first wife. Instead, the rationale that she is bringing about is that since you already have a wife who cooks your food, who manages your household, takes care of your children, what more do you need? So she feels like his loyalty and his faithfulness should be to her only because she takes care of his needs and not for any other reason. So she's already been sacrificing a lot of things for him up until this point, and her assumption is that this is why her husband needs to keep continuing to have her. Okay, so if you look at the last line of the quote, it says, "All you've ever wanted, I've given you before you had to ask twice. Think about it." So it feels like this is coming out of a need and a want based situation. I given you what you needed, so give me what I need in return. Do not leave me in order to marry the second wife as such. And there is also this belief that stems from the first wife, where she believes that inherently her role in the house is to satisfy her husband, and that her dedication as a wife and as a mother is what he should be desiring in a partner, is what his primary concern in a partner should be like, which is why the entire idea of him going for a second wife baffles her, because there is nothing to do with relationship partnership in that marriage. So she does not see why there is a need for the second wife. Now if you continue going uh, forward in the story, you realize that once the second wife does come into the picture, the first wife realizes she has a little bit of free time in her hand. And after putting herself through the stage of denial, grief, and finally coming into the stage of acceptance, she decided that she will continue to do all the things she couldn't do as of now. So if you look at this quote, it says, the husband's asking her, do you accept the fact that I go to her? Why not, if it gives you pleasure? I stared intently at his bowed head. Do as you please, and I will remain an ideal wife. You are indeed the proverbial good woman. Okay, so for him, that is what that sacrifice that she made to not be his only wife is what proved to be the ideal wife as such. So for all these years that she decided to spend taking care of him, taking care of his needs, all of that did not really seem to take precedence in their marriage. But you also look at this fact that when the first wife started uh, bringing out the traits of what he assumed is an ideal spouse, the spouse that is continuing to be self-sacrificing and at the same time accepting of any situation the husband brings home. And on top of all of that, now that she started going off into various other activities, like going back into being a part of the club that she used to chair at a point of time, all of that seems to unsettle her husband as well. He does not realize or understand as to what is it that brought about this acceptance in his first wife that he couldn't really get up until this point of time. Now, if you look at the whole story, do we end up with a conclusion where the first wife either leaves the household, leaves the husband, becomes an independent woman, or does she continue staying the proverbial good woman, as her husband had called her as such? Now, when you look at it, she continues to stay in the marriage, and she's also come to terms with the fact that her husband has a second uh, wife in the marriage as such. Now, does Titus Basino give us a solution for this polygamy or this practice of polygamy that continues to prevail in society? And at the same time, what are the complexities that you see arising in society as a result of it, especially for women as such? Now, polygamy isn't only about someone having a second wife or a third wife, and polygamy also leads to a lot more violence, a lot less choices that a woman has. Divorced women are usually ostracized from society. So in that case, what could the first wife have done, besides being accepting of the situation? So Titus Basino isn't bringing to us a sort of a resolution through the story. She's instead presenting us with the reality of what women in polygamous marriage end up facing as such. That is particularly their lack of autonomy in the choices that they make. Now, we also figure out that a lot of these marriage regulations are also based on religious institutions, and that men would circumvent or bend legal laws in order to continue this practice. So, if you look at the first wife, it would seem to be to bring about a very satisfying conclusion where she leaves the husband and she goes and stays on her own. She lives as a single woman. She either divorces the husband or just leaves the marriage and separates from the husband. But she also has children to worry about. She has about 10 children. And if you looked at the very first quote presented, that is also something that she talks about how because she has children to look after, she has to continue being sacrificing. She has to think about her children and what difficulties they might face if she decided that she is going to leave her husband as such. So now if we look at this particular quote, I devoutly believed that as a woman, I was destined to accept and to protect. I devoutly believed that. Okay. And then, and also considered the fate of my children, I would merely have asked for a divorce and left him. So it is not to say that the first wife has no choices, or she is has not really considered her choices outside this marriage, or that she does not have the ability to contemplate her life outside this marriage, but rather that she has contemplated and she also knows the results of her life outside the marriage. So for her, her ability to sacrifice her life in order to protect the future well-being of her children mattered more in the sense, and that as a woman, she felt that her role and responsibility was to continue to protect both her husband and her child, that it was her destiny to accept the situation that she faced at her home as such. So throughout the whole story, even though polygamy is the underlying notion that we see in the story, we also have to look at what makes a woman an ideal wife of for her husband. What can a woman do in order to be considered the ideal wife? Because for centuries we believed in the concept that an ideal wife takes care of the household, takes care of the family, manages the situation, cooks and cleans for her family. But for a woman who has gone through and who has done all of this for her husband, she seems to still have missed out on something. There seems to still be this want that her husband is not able to get out of her. He wants the woman that she was before she was married to him, the woman who could go off to clubs, the woman who was a chairperson of these, meetings, the woman who ran things outside the household. So he was a husband who expected both from his wife. He expected her to behave as a wife in the household, and as the representative of him outside the household as such. So to what extent can a woman sacrifice and be sacrificial before she realizes that there are only certain things that can bring about some sort of a devotion, that some sort of a pleasures, some sort of an interest in her husband, and that just because she fulfilled the criteria that was laid out for her as a wife did not mean that he would continue to stay loyal and to protect her as such. Now when we're looking at this idea of the ideal woman and the idea of the good woman. That's what he calls her. You are indeed the proverbial good woman as such. So the proverbial good woman is something that society has always come in full cycle of for centuries together. The idea of what makes a woman an ideal wife has been fine-tuned to fit into the patriarchal system that has been constantly run by these men who want to take advantage of the situation presented to them. So the question that I want to leave you with is, can a woman ever fit into the ideal role presented by society for her husband? Can a woman do both? Can a woman do both, in a sense, do both without facing any sort of a complex situation in society? Can a woman have successful career, successful personal life, successful public life, and a successful home life? Can a woman balance, or can will society ever come up and say that a woman has done enough? A woman uh, is able to balance both. A woman is a woman has successfully been able to be a part of both the professional and the domestic sphere, that is without overburdening her with even more responsibilities than she already has. So this is something that I wanted to leave you with as such. So thank you.